Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're basically drawing a map. A map that takes us from that, really common feeling of unease, all the way to a life that feels clear and full of purpose. And it all kicks off with a little story we tell ourselves.
It starts with something small, right? Just a tiny little story we tell ourselves to feel a bit safer, maybe to dodge a hard truth, or hey, just to make it through the day. We tell ourselves it's harmless, but these little self-lies, they're often the very first seed of a much, much deeper conflict.
And this is a perfect example. On the outside, we say, yeah, the job's fine. But inside, we feel that soul-crushing drain every single day. That little lie becomes a kind of comfort blanket. Yeah, it feels warm for a second, but it's actually stopping us from facing the cold, hard fact that something really needs to change. And that gap, the space between what we say and what we feel, it creates this kind of internal static.
Well, that nagging, buzzing feeling of discomfort, that static, it actually has a scientific name that psychologists have been exploring for over 40 years now: cognitive dissonance. It's basically the mental stress you feel when your beliefs and your actions are at war with each other. Think of it like your brain's own internal alarm bell, screaming, hey, something here just doesn't add up.
All right, so let's really get into this universal experience of inner conflict. Because it's not just some vague, fuzzy feeling. Psychologists have actually created some amazing models to help us understand exactly what is going on in our heads when we feel this way. So the big question is, why do we feel it? What's the engine behind this dissonance? Well, a framework called the self-standards model gives us a kind of map. It shows that after we do something, anything really, our brain doesn't just move on. It actually hits pause to review and assess that very behavior. And here you can see the two roads our brain can go down after we act. Our mind immediately starts judging that action, and it uses one of two different yardsticks to do it. The first path is when we measure our behavior against our own personal rules. And the second path, that's when we compare what we did to the world around us, to what society expects. So let's break this down a bit. On path one, we've got what's called idiographic dissonance, which is just a fancy term for saying it's personal and unique to you. It's all about your own private expectations. So if you've got high self-esteem and you do something that doesn't meet your own high bar, wow, you're going to feel that conflict intensely. But on path two, the dissonance is called nomothetic, meaning it's based on a general rule. This is when you judge your actions based on what most people think is okay. And here's the interesting part. Your own self-esteem doesn't really matter as much because you're measuring yourself against a standard that applies to pretty much everyone. It's that universal, I probably shouldn't have done that feeling.
Okay, so if this dissonance feels so bad, how do we get rid of it? Well, if the problem is a mismatch between our beliefs and our actions, then the solution has to be getting them back in sync. And that whole process starts with a pretty big dose of truth.
The first and honestly the most courageous step you can take to resolve all this inner conflict is to practice what's called radical self-honesty. Now, this isn't about beating yourself up. It's about getting crystal clear. It's about looking at the messy, awkward, do I really have to admit that's me? Parts of yourself and choosing to look anyway.
And that is a totally fair question. I mean, it sounds terrifying, right? To look straight at the very things we've been running from. It's tough. You might be thinking, look, I already feel kind of crummy. Why would I want to pile this on top? So yeah, why on earth would anyone choose to do this?
Because the payoff, it's just massive. You stop burning all this energy carrying around that hidden baggage. You get this incredible clarity about what you actually need and want in your life. And here's the thing. It's the absolute foundation for any real change. You simply cannot fix a problem you refuse to even see. And all of that leads to authenticity, that amazing feeling when your inside world and your outside world are finally in alignment.
Okay, so radical self-honesty tells you the what. It tells you where you really are right now. But what's so cool is that it also opens the door to the why. Once you start to clear away that fog of self-deception, you can finally start asking the bigger, more meaningful questions. Not just about who you are, but about who you really want to become. And this is where the amazing field of positive psychology comes in and gives us some seriously powerful tools. See, instead of focusing on what's broken or what's wrong with us, it completely flips the script and helps us build what's right. The whole field is dedicated to figuring out what makes life truly worth living. So here are 3 simple but really profound exercises you can literally start with today. Grab a journal and ask yourself, when do I feel the most alive? Try visualizing your ideal future. Get really specific and vivid. And start a gratitudes practice. And don't just think of it as a nice little habit. Think of it as a diagnostic tool that shows you what genuinely brings you joy and fulfillment. When you do these things, you start to see the patterns that point straight to your purpose. So, what does life actually look and feel like when you get to the other side? After you've worked through that initial discomfort, practiced that radical honesty, and you've started to find a purpose that's actually rooted in your own truth. Well, the payoff is just huge. You develop this deep self-awareness, and you naturally start taking more ownership of your actions. That, in turn, helps you build more real, more meaningful relationships. You get tougher, more resilient when things go wrong, and study after study shows you report a much higher level of overall life satisfaction. And really, this is the heart of it all. Getting your inner and outer worlds to match up isn't just about feeling less bad. It creates this deep sense of things being right. It's an incredible source of personal power. In a world that so often asks us to be someone else, knowing and accepting yourself, that's a superpower. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. Yeah, your truth can be uncomfortable to face, but what's more uncomfortable in the long run? The pain of facing it or the pain of trying to live a life without it? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.